We must bear patiently not being good, nor being not thought as good. You have been telling yourself not good enough. You have been telling yourself I'm a shit. You have been deciding that other people have decided that you're a shit. When I was kicked out of law enforcement, and if you don't know that story, there's a few videos about it. About 7 years ago, I went down a really downhill slide of mental health and anger and eventually was let go. No doctor would sign for me to go back after having to burn all my sick time because of what we now know as emotional distress. But either way, I was out. And for years, I was bitter about that. For years, I was angry about that. But eventually, I had to learn. I wasn't angry because of them. I don't like how they treated it. I don't like how they tried to diagnose it. I don't like how they kicked me out with no pension instead of trying to help me. But what I was really upset about was the decision that I was a total shit. I was a shit because I couldn't do that job anymore. I was a shit because I could not make it, in my thoughts, to my retirement. And I was going to have to tell everybody out there why I was no longer doing that job, why I was no longer performing in a job that I loved, why I was no longer performing in a job that to this day I still take pride in. As a matter of fact, as we were putting up our Christmas tree the other day, my wife asked if we could hang up the police ornaments because for many years I couldn't do it. For many years, I wouldn't do it. And that upset her and it made her sad. And we had conversations about it. I'd taken all the police things down around my house. But it's not because looking at them made me sad. It's not because looking at them made me think of calls or traumatic things I had seen. It's because looking at those things reminded me in my mind that I was a total shit, that I couldn't do that job anymore, that I was worthless and no good and terrible. One of the things I learned while doing therapy with trauma clients and trauma victims is that adults with childhood trauma present very differently. When somebody comes in and they're dealing with the trauma that they've seen, say a car wreck or a shooting or 9/11 or a family member passing away or some kind of assault, we're kind of dealing with that one issue. We're dealing with the nightmares and the flashbacks. We're dealing with the feelings of not good enough and that it's my fault or I wasn't fast enough. We've got to deal with those negative cognitions, we call them, because they're kind of making the trauma stick around, not just the visuals. It's making the actual feeling get stuck. I would work with these adults with childhood trauma, mostly sexual trauma, unfortunately, because that's the way that part of the crappy world is today. I'd work with these adults with childhood trauma, and I would notice that they were getting better, but I could never get them to kind of turn the corner. I never could get them to understand they weren't bad people. I never could get them to understand it wasn't their fault. It wasn't processing like other traumas. It wasn't going through like the other things that I had helped people with. So admittedly, I reached out to a mentor, told him that I was having trouble with this. And he had a class actually for adults with childhood trauma. So about 5 minutes into this class that I had traveled and paid for, he told me something very impactful to me. The difference between regular trauma and adults with childhood trauma is that adults with childhood trauma have an overarching umbrella of shame involved with it. They feel shameful. They don't just feel not good enough. They don't just feel like it's their fault. They don't just feel like they should have impacted it or done something. They feel all of it. They feel shame. They feel not good enough. And until you deal with that umbrella of shame, that impactful umbrella, overarching feeling of shame, you're not going to deal with the traumas. This is what I was dealing with. Well, I would never compare myself to somebody who's now an adult that had childhood trauma. I had a pretty good childhood. You've seen that in other videos and when we do lives on YouTube. I had a pretty good childhood, but I had an overarching umbrella of shame. I had an overarching feeling of shame and not good enough and that I was a shit. And that came because I decided that since I wasn't, quote, good enough to do that job, to do policing anymore, every time I saw it, reminded me that I wasn't good enough and I'm a shit. I work with people all the time that have trouble getting to themselves or through to themselves that they can handle something and they can handle things going wrong. I get a lot of no's and I don't think so's and I understand what you're trying to say, but I don't believe that I can get there. Well, we're not trying to convince you that bad things won't happen, folks. Bad things will happen. They have happened. They will continue to happen. I just spent the last weekend in Western Kentucky helping out peace officers who were dealing with tornadoes, having to pull bodies out of places, seeing difficult things, seeing homes taken away, seeing families ripped apart, physically and metaphorically. So dealing with that stuff doesn't have that umbrella of shame. That's individual traumas. But you're not going to deal with the individual trauma. I'm not going to convince you that bad things aren't going to happen. Bad things are going to happen. We don't have to be okay with them. We don't have to like them. We don't have to look forward to them. But I can tell you two things. You've got to get rid of the catastrophizing. That everything is the worst thing that could possibly happen. It's not. It's not, folks. It may be the worst for you right now, but it's not the worst that could happen. And your I can't stand it itis. If it happens, I can't possibly stand it. Well, let me tell you what not stand it means. It means it killed you. Too many of you think that stand it means it went well, or I handled it well, or I was able to find the perfect solution. Nope. No perfect solution for some traumas, folks. There's no perfect solution for some of the things that happen to people. Sometimes bad things happen. I won't convince you otherwise, but you can handle it. And you're definitely not going to feel like you can handle it if you continue to tell yourself that you're a shit. If you continue to tell yourself that you're not worthy, that you're not good enough, that you're not a good person, that you're not a good dad, that you're not a good mom, that you're not a good husband or wife, that you're not a good employee, that you're not a good officer or firefighter or whatever it is that you do. Stop talking to yourself that way. There are challenges for this. You have got to change your basic beliefs. You have got to change your filter. You're not a shit. You're not going to change that by just telling yourself you're not a shit. We have got to get some evidence on board. We have got to change your filter. This is what we do. This is rational emotive behavior therapy. This is the consulting that I do. If this is you, if you can't get past feeling like a shit, you have got to go to my website, theangryvikingtherapist.com. Please smash the red button. Please sign up. Let's start the conversation. You're not a shit. Other people have told you you're not a shit. You just won't believe them. I don't care if you act that way in public or if you just do it privately. We have got to change your filter. You're not broken. You're not messed up. You're not stupid. You have an overarching theme of shame or not good enough. You won't change it by just telling yourself that you are. There's no fake positives in my program. I want you to go to my website, smash the red button. Let's start on the Angry Viking mindset method. We've got to change your filter. Stop wallowing in your shit.